We do have some new sponsors on the show starting this week, so listen in to what they have to offer.
You are now tuned into Shotgun Sports USA, powered by Winchester. Recorded in the U.S. and streaming all over the world. We talk to shotgun shooters from all disciplines, championship-winning coaches, gun clubs, world-class target setters, vendors, and industry-leading companies that fuel the sport. If you are into clay target sports, you are at the right place for insider information from some of the best in the world every single week. Remember to subscribe to our podcast, leave us a review, and connect with us on social media. You can also catch our episodes on shotgunsportsusa.com. Being a brand name in the clay target industry, Rick Hemingway has said, "Have you ever noticed almost all major sporting events are being run by Pro-Matic traps?" Think about that statement for a minute. He's right, and you may want to consider that before making your next purchase. Rick is the largest Pro-Matic dealer specializing in individual and commercial trap sales. Rick provides skeet, trap, 5-stamp, and sporting clays, designs, installs, and service. He also offers accessories such as solar panels, wireless release systems, as well as the hottest item on the market, the Claybot by Renair Products. Visit www.backwoodsquailclub.com or give him a call at 843-546-1466. Castellani shooting vests are manufactured in Italy and internationally recognized by elite shooters as the most popular, lightweight shooting vests on the market. Castellani vests are especially known for their Italian styling and superior craftsmanship and quality, making them a vest of choice for all shooting disciplines. Ultimate Shooting Accessories is the exclusive supplier of Castellani vests in the United States. Visit UltimateShootingAccessories.com for more information and to place your order.
Hi, this is Derek Mine, Sporting Clay's World Champion and 2020 Olympian, here for Shotgun Sports USA. I've been using Pila's for over 10 years. Pila is worn by more world champions and professionals than all other brands combined. They offer a complete system of lenses and frame technology to maximize visual performance. Visit www.pilasport.com and use our partner code ShotgunSports for a special offer. The code at checkout is ShotgunSports and is available to use for all products on the site. Pila, technically the finest eyewear in the world. It's an unfair advantage.
The Double D Foundation, launched by Daniel Defense Executive Vice President Cindy Daniel, is a product of a vision. Like all charitable organizations, the Double D Foundation has a purpose: to protect the Second Amendment by growing the number of Americans involved in shooting sports who understand the fundamentals of firearm safety and who share the core belief that the Second Amendment defends the rest. For more information, visit thedoubledfoundation.org.
This episode has a lot of things in it that most people won't talk about. The good and the bad on how the sport has evolved, his opinion on how to grow the sport faster than it's growing now, along with how the PSCA Season 4 could come back. This is a very interesting conversation and a long episode. Please welcome one of the best in the business, Mr. Scott Robertson. Scott, it's great to finally have you on the show. And you know, I've had a ton of requests to have you on, and after finding out a little more about you over the years, I completely understand why they asked.
Well, I'm not quite sure, but I appreciate you having me on anyway.
Yeah, so tell everyone listening, where, who you are and where you're from and what you're doing now.
My name's Scott Robertson, obviously. I have been shooting pretty much all my life. My dad was a shooting instructor back in the 80s in California. He shot on the Air Force team, and my grandfather, I believe, is the only one in the state of California. He won the state trap championship as a sub-junior, a junior, open, veteran, and super veteran. So his career spanned almost 70 years of shooting with a little time off for World War II, but come from a long line of trap shooters and hunters, and so that's, I guess I never really had a chance. So just started out that way. In fact, I think when I was born, my dad said, "Well, we got a trap shooter," so he didn't even tell people if it was a boy or a girl, just a trap shooter. So, long line of shooting in our family for sure.
How do you like trap now? Do you still like to shoot it now?
Oh, yeah, I enjoy going every now and then and shooting, the Grand and, maybe the state shoot. I grew up in California, so Kingsburg's where they have the state trap shoot every year, and, lots of good memories there. So I enjoy a couple times a year, but to be quite honest, it's hard for me to not get bored.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree with you. So you also own a gun club. Tell me a little bit about that.
I do. I own a couple of clubs. I've got Elm Fork in Dallas. I've got a partner, a gentleman named Mark Richmond, that we've been partners since 2001 when we originally bought Elm Fork, and then we bought the rifle and pistol side of the facility in 2007. So 20 years we've been running Elm Fork. I've hosted several big shoots there. We did the Texas State shoot a couple times, and the Angleport Open and the Learjet Open. I think we did the zone shoot, which is now the regional shoot, back in, I think, 2008 or something. So done some big tournaments there, and now we're really too busy to host tournaments anymore because, being right in the middle of Dallas, I mean, we probably average 400 to 500 people a weekend day just shooting rounds of sporting clays.
Wow.
And then we have 147 rifle and pistol positions. I think there's 14 different ranges, and we try and put to 400 or 500 rifle and pistol shooters on a weekend day. So it's really a busy facility. We're 6 miles from DFW Airport and 8 miles from Love Field, so kind of right in the middle of the two airports. So we're one of the last metropolitan clubs left. Then I've got Side by Side Ranch up in Oklahoma, which is a hunting ranch. We do a lot of deer and elk and hogs, kind of specialize in hogs and thermal and night vision hunts. And then we've got lodging and all the amenities of sporting clays up here. And of course, we've hosted a couple of PSCA tour events and 2 regionals, I think, and the National Feed Task one year. So, between the 2 facilities, it certainly keeps us hopping.
Oh, yeah. I hadn't been to Elm Fork, but I have been to Side by Side. And I can remember driving through, and huge deer were just standing on the side of the road. Like nothing bothered them. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, we've got whitetail, fallow, axis deer, elk, 17 different species, I think, now. And it gets out of hand rather quickly. It just it turns into 3-4 days a week just trying to feed them and keep on top of them. We've got about 400 or 500 hogs on the property, and if you don't feed them, they'll tear the place up in one night. So it certainly keeps us busy.
How big is Side by Side?
Side by Side is 450 acres.
Okay.
So it's grown over the years. It started out with 100 acres in 2008, and we've just kind of kept building and chipping away, and finally got a pretty good ranch. You always want bigger, but now land's getting so expensive. I'm glad that I did what I could when I back in the day. I mean, we stretched and borrowed and did what we could to buy the land 10 years ago, and now, I mean, shoot, it's getting so expensive. It's hard to it's hard to justify it. When you're doing a shooting range, if you get over about 5,000 an acre, you just can't cash flow it. So you got to be careful, not to put too much in on your land, or you never get it paid for.
Yeah. Yeah. I've gone to a fair amount of shoots here lately, and I haven't seen you in a while. Well, where have you been just focusing on this? Is that what your main focus is right now, or are you still shooting competitively? I only shot about 3 shoots last year. I shot the Nationals, and I think I won the sub-gauge high overall for the 8th time last year. So I still enjoy to shoot the sub-gauge. I haven't been shooting a lot in the last couple of years. I've been so busy with the ranch, and this last year with COVID, it kind of
it's a blessing and a curse. I mean, no one likes the whole COVID thing, and it's done, good and bad to our industry. But, I guess the one good side was that since people can't travel, they can't go to Africa, they can't go to South America bird hunting, and everything's kind of closed down.
Mm-hmm.
They were looking for stateside opportunities. And so our business really got crazy busy last fall and this spring. I think in April we hunted 28, the 30 days in April. So it's just been really busy and crazy, and with the ammo shortage and everything going on, but the fact that guys can't travel, they've been looking for an outlet close by. So that's been one positive.
You brought up a little bit ago that you were born into shotgun sports, which stem back to your grandfather being an amazing shooter. What are some of the lessons that you learned from your dad and your grandfather that have helped you throughout your career?
Well, looking back on it, and trying to figure out what to teach my boys, Clay, my oldest boy, he's 20, and he's, he got third overall, I think, at the regional in Georgia this year. So, I mean, that was great to see him starting to excel, and trying to teach them the lessons. A couple of things that my dad did that I didn't appreciate until later, and I didn't really understand what he was doing at the time. So my dad was a professional shooting instructor for 30 years. And so he taught mostly it was international in El Monte back then. Now it was Triple B, and I think now it's LA Clays. I think they just changed ownership. But that's kind of where I grew up. And so every Wednesday and Thursday, my dad would teach lessons. And so I would go and watch him after school as 8 years old, 8, 9, 10 years old. And so if somebody was late for a lesson or he got early, done early, he would let me shoot. And so back in those days, he would say, all right, get your gun, you can shoot until you miss. And so it put quite a bit of pressure on me, because I knew as long as I didn't miss, I got to keep shooting. And so then it got to the point when I got a little bit older, 9, 10, 11 years old, he would bet me. He would say, all right, I'm going to bet you $1, or I'm going to bet you a soda pop, and we're going to shoot, 10 targets of my choosing or whatever. Well, what it did that I didn't really recognize till later is that it taught me about the pressure curve, and it taught me how to compete, because when you're 10 years old, $1 is about all you have in your pocket. So, if I'm betting my dad for $1, I'm betting basically everything I got. And so the pressure of doing that back in those times, I never really understood what he was doing. But what's interesting about that story is when I turned 18, I had just won my second national college championship, and Sandy Wood from Winchester and Phil Murray from Beretta came to me at the college national championships and said, hey, we got an opening and we'd like to give you an opportunity to shoot. So that was actually the beginning of my professional career. Was at 18 years old while I was in college, or actually I was 19 at the time. And before that, I literally couldn't afford to practice. My grandfather gave me one case of shotgun shells a month, and I had to budget that for everything, practice, tournaments, you name it. All I had is one case a month. And so that actually changed things. But what it taught me is that no matter what the shoot was, whether it was a world championship or the national championship, the pressure curve was exactly the same. It has been exactly the same my whole life. So when I was 8, 9, 10 years old trying to beat my dad for $1 a soda pop, my brain associated that that's competition. And so I had two modes. I had competition and practice. And in practice, I'm lousy. But if you say, hey, I'll bet you $10 or $20 or $100 or $1,000, there's a switch flips and I'm a different guy. And so it did help me when I turned pro, because one of the hardest things when you get good or you turn pro or you get your first sponsorship is the pressure of expectation, right? People expecting you to win. And the problem with expectation pressure is you're never satisfied as the competitor. So if you win, you're supposed to, and if you lose, there's something wrong with you. So it is a very interesting pressure, and luckily for me, I had been doing it for so long, it was just natural. I mean, I at 8 years old, I was accustomed to going all in and pushing all the chips in for everything I had in my pocket. And, I did that many times in my career. I mean, I joke now, but when Wendy and I were first married, there was a time for 3 or 4 years that not every shoot, but probably 80% of the time I wrote a hot check to go to the shoot. And I would hopefully win. And, luckily I did win enough that I would go and buy my check back on Sunday. And, back in those days, they paid out the same day. And so I would just write the check and go shoot the shoot and then win and say, can I buy my check back and get the difference and go to the next shoot? So, it was, I have a good friend here in Dallas, that helped me throughout my career on, a lot of different things. But one day I went to a big flyer shoot and didn't do so good. This was about 7 or 8 years ago. He said, you know what your problem is? I said, what's that? He said, you can afford to lose now. And I laughed and I thought about that. I said, there's something to that, because when you can't afford to lose, you learn to deal with the pressure and the fear a little differently than other times.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and, you were gambling with yourself. You were talking about that earlier, how you would, you would bet your dad just turn into a different person and going and writing a check that's not any good to shoot a shoot, and then gambling with yourself knowing you had to win. I mean, that's added pressure right there as well as the shoot, Well, there's no question. And so it's, I try and think, how can I teach that to my boys that are doing it? And I don't know that there's really a way to teach that. It's just something that out of circumstance. But, Andy Duffy and I were talking, I don't know, a couple of years ago. And, Andy and I kind of came up in the same era. He and I battled, no matter where we were, he and I were battling to win the shoot. And, back in those days, Andy hated me. But the problem is, Andy didn't know why he hated me. Andy hated anybody, right? That's how he dealt with the fear. So everybody deals with the fear and the pressure differently. So Andy's way was, we had to be, enemies. And so he was kind of like that with everybody. Now he and I have fished together and hunt together, and we kind of appreciate, what we had been through. Now, we were talking, and he says, we could never do what we did now in the game today. And I said, you know what, that's 100% right. Because back in the 90s, there was enough money and prize money that you literally could go to a shoot and cash flow yourself. And now it's not there. Nobody now in the game, if they can't afford to play, can win their way to the top. Yeah.
And that's unfortunate.
Yeah. What is, speaking of the back in the days, what is the good and the bad with how the sport has evolved over the years, in your opinion?
It takes a lot. It would take a lot of time to unwrap that onion, but a lot of things. The good and the bad. There's so much there on that. The NSCA, there's been a lot of good and a lot of bad with the NSCA. And what I mean by that is the NSCA has done quite a bit to promote, how do I say this right and be politically correct? I'm going to say it this way. The NSCA has done a very good job of promoting NSCA sporting clays. They really haven't had time for anything else. And I don't know that I can blame them. However, if you're a governing body, you should do a little bit more. And it's unfortunate. So let me give an example. Back in the 90s, there was a group of us, myself, John Kruger, Andy Duffy, Boo Dykes, Pat Litsky, those type of guys. Bobby Fowler started to come in the late 90s. Bobby and I became pretty good friends. There was a group of guys, and there was 5 guys, and you knew pretty much every shoot, one of those 5 was going to win. It was just a matter of whose turn it was. So it created a couple of different issues with the association and the sponsors and how we dealt with things. So NSCA's in the late 90s, Mike Hampton came and said, well, we're going to change the Team USA program because we're tired of the same guys being on the U.S. team. And I said, well, wait a minute. Why would you do that? If we're the best, which we were in '96, we won the first gold medal for America, and we had never won a gold medal before that. We were busting the glass ceiling, if you will. And I'm like, we just won a couple of gold medals. Why would you change it? And if we're the best, why do you have to? Well, we need to give other people an opportunity. I thought, why on earth wouldn't we want to field the best team? Why wouldn't that be whether it's me or John or anybody? Why wouldn't we want the best team? So that was odd to me. But then in the late '90s, Carlisle and myself were doing some shooting instruction together, and a guy named Raymond Foreman, who invented five stand, believe it or not, came to Dan and I with an idea. And the idea was kind of snooker. I didn't know how to play snooker. It's a pool game with different colored balls, and I can't tell you how the rules work, but he came with this idea about snooker. So Dan and I took it, we tweaked and twisted it, and changed it into what we now shoot as make or break. Well, in 1996, I made a deal with NSSF, and at the time they had the NSSF Chevy Truck Shooting Sports America. It was a TV show they had on ESPN. So Dan and I and Raymond and I got together with the guys at NSSF, and we cut a deal to do the first professional tour. Now, it had been tried back in about '94. The NSCA tried it, but the flaw was that they went to very first one was in Houston, and they had a $10,000 prize, and it was five stand, and they were going to film it. And the very first one was in Houston. Well, I actually won the very first one in Houston and got the $10,000, and that was all well and good. Well, then I think the next one was, I think they had one at Hopkins, and I think there were two or three others, one in Georgia and around the country. There was a series of them. In fact, when you're at Nationals, you can see that big NSCA semi-trailer on the green course. Mm-hmm. That was the trailer that Pete Mash used to pull around, and that was Pete's first job. He was the driver, the semi-driver. And I used to call him BJ and the Bear because there was a TV show back in the '80s, and he looked just like BJ and the Bear. But that's what he did. So he was like the first mobile unit, if you will. And they had that pro tour. But the problem was, the flaw was, they wanted the gun clubs to put up the $10,000, right? And that was, you just can't tax the gun clubs to pay everything. And so, that was kind of the downfall of that. So then, a couple of years later, Carlisle and I, we put together the Make or Break Tour, and we set it on the back of a series of large shoots. Well, then the NSCA actively went to all of the sponsors and told them not to support the Make or Break Tour because they didn't own it and they couldn't guarantee exposure. Okay, well, here's the problem. The guys that were funding it, the guys that were putting the money, were non-industry guys. They liked to hunt and shoot, but they weren't in the industry. They just put up some money and said, we'd like to see this thing, go well. And after we got into it 3 or 4 shoots, these guys started to lose interest because their belief was, hey, if the governing body of sporting clays will not support us, what's it all worth?
Right.
If we can't even get their support, this will never work. And they were right. Okay? So the NSCA, although they've done some good things for sporting and for the NSCA, they haven't supported outside projects. So if you kind of step back and look at it, NSCA is running the largest gun club in the world, not necessarily an association. Association's great, and it's there, but there's a reason why the National Championships is in San Antonio every year. If it wasn't, if it was really about, moving it around the country, and then they came up in '92 with the U.S. Open, and we started to move that around the country. I don't know that they really wanted a U.S. Open. In fact, David Judah was the one that created the U.S. Open at the Homestead, and that was his shoot. And then they kind of assumed the name and started to move it around, in the mid 90s. But, they're all about shoots in San Antonio.
No.
So anybody that's wanting to promote stuff and do stuff outside the mainstream has had a hard time. So why do I bring this all up? Naturally, we're going to bring it into the PSCA. Originally, I was on the executive committee of the NSCA, and I was in charge of the marketing fund when PSCA started.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at their original format, and I was not thrilled with it. And the reason I wasn't thrilled with it is because I had learned from what we had done right or wrong in '96 when we tried to do the Make a Break, and I looked at the format and I said, this is not doable. You cannot film a 4-hour event and make it interesting on TV. It's not going to happen.
Right.
And so they came to the marketing committee the first year, and they wanted NSCA to support it. So we're having a meeting, and you have the main meeting with the 45 people of the AC, and then the EC meets, and lots of politics and lots of things going on behind the scenes. But here I was in charge of the marketing committee. So basically, it's my budget to control, and I've got to, make decisions and make recommendations, and then we got to vote it out of subcommittee, and then it goes to the AC. So I'm not for it, but I'm thinking, you know what? We've got to look at this different, because my personal beliefs don't mean anything. What if this actually works? Then it can benefit the sport tenfold. It can do what I've been preaching to everybody for years, that a Make a Break or a Pro Tour concept in general could do, which is bring more people into the sport. One of the problems that NSCA has is there's no pinnacle. There's no place to aspire to, right? So people lose interest. So when you're trying to get kids and juniors motivated, we want you to become a professional shooter. Okay, why? Oh, well, so that you could go to the national championships and win a pickle dish. Oh, gee, that sounds exciting, right? So there had to be something for people to aspire to, because the number one thing, I've been doing this for 30 years. I shot professionally for Beretta for 30 years. And the problem in our sport that's different than any other sports is we never created heroes. And we didn't create heroes on purpose. And this is the whole sad part about the story, is that if I say golf, what do you think of? You think of, Tiger Woods, Mickelson, name your hero.
Right. If
I say baseball, same thing, basketball. Even if I say fishing, you go, Jimmy Houston, Kevin Van Dam, right?
Right.
If I say shooting, you go, Beretta, Winchester. Look at all the packaging, right?
Yeah.
You go to Cabela's, you go in the fishing section, there's people's pictures everywhere. You go in the sports section, people's pictures everywhere, right? If you go in the shooting section, it's Beretta, Winchester, Fiocchi, and it's a picture of a clay target or some duck or some dog, right?
Right.
Okay, so we haven't created heroes, and that's one of the problems, right? And so here's the reason why we haven't created heroes, because the same guys that are in charge of the political and the way that the organizations go are the same guys, right?
Yeah.
In trap, in skeet, in sporting clays. I mean, NSCA has pretty much controlled, sporting clays and skeet forever. So it's a very small group of people that control the inner workings of the organization. The other problem is the way the industry works. It was easy for years for the industry to come to the NSCA in a nice little package and give their sponsorship money. Let me give you an example. Let's say, theoretically, that Remington has a $500,000 a year total marketing budget. Okay? And they come to the NSCA. Now, I'm the director of marketing for Remington. So what do I want to do? I'm gonna pay out some money. I want good representation, but really, mostly, I want to look good to my superiors, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
I go sit down with, Mike Hampton or Chris Hampton at the SHOT Show, and she says, Scott, look at what we've got for $250,000. You can sponsor the national championship, the world skeet, the Southwestern Grand Trap shoot, the AIM, the blah, blah, blah. And she's going to list 10 or 12 shoots. All happen to be at National Complex in San Antonio, right? But on paper, really look very impressive.
Right.
So what do? Yeah, you're right. Here, boom, half my budget. Let's go to lunch. And so in a matter of 10 minutes, the NSCA or NSSCA has made it easy for the industry to just say, here, give us your money. We'll take care of it for you. Right? So they really haven't done the time to do the research and sponsor the shooters and develop shoots and do innovative programs. It was just so easy for 20, 30 years to say, oh, yep, here's half of my marketing budget. And then what do? I get to go to Remington, sit in a boardroom, and I have a PowerPoint that says, we're sponsoring this shoot, this shoot, this shoot, this shoot, this shoot. Great. The brass at the top, look around, everybody's smiling. Great, let's go to lunch. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how this industry has worked for 30 years. Well, the problem is that's part of the reason why we're not growing.
Yeah.
Because we're not doing anything. We're not teaching gun clubs how to become better business owners. We're not teaching people how to develop a better product at the local level. We're not making a better mousetrap as far as the NSCA is concerned. Let me give you an example. I own 2 shooting ranges, but let's say at Elm Fork, right? And you're a new shooter, and you come in and you say, Scott, I really like this. I've been practicing for 3 or 4 weeks. I want to try this whole tournament thing. All right. And then you say, tell me about the NSCA shoot you have on Sunday. And I say, well, Justin, we got this NSCA shoot, and it's $65, and we're going to provide lunch, and you're going to get points and punches. What can I win? Oh, well, you get points and punches, and isn't that fun? And you're like, points and punches, what is that? I mean, what do I win? Well, you're going to get All-American points and punches, and then maybe a trophy. And you go, okay, well, that's nice. And then you say, well, I noticed that there's this charity event on Friday. Tell me about that. Oh, well, Justin, it's a charity event. It's non-registered, no points and punches, but you pay $100. Everybody gets a shooting pouch. You get free lunch. They're going to serve beer afterway. They're going to give away 5 guns in a drawing and a golf cart first place. And you're like, I'll see you on Friday.
Right.
So part of the reason that NSCA is not growing is because the mousetrap's broken. What do they offer? If you're not into points and punches, we got nothing for you except dollar target shooting. And if you want, the Nationals is a fun $3,000 weekend. Okay, great. But the problem is we're really missing the boat because we're not innovative. We're not giving people reason to shoot. So what happens is you got a whole industry of guys that they aspire to be master class. They make it. Then what? There's nothing. Then they say, gee, I'm in master class. Gee, what? I'm not quite good enough to win because I can't beat these guys who do it for a living. So I guess I'll go fishing.
Right.
And that's why we have 2% growth. 2% growth because the amount of people that come in equals the amount of people leave because there's just nothing there. So that's why the PSCA was exciting because it gave that next level. But the problem is we didn't have the support from the industry once again, and we didn't have the support like we needed from the pros. And so, ultimately you can't keep going to the same people for money. It's hard to raise the sponsor money. So, unfortunately, unless we get, outside the industry money, which is hard to get, unfortunately, I don't really think we're going to see anything, grab on and grow in the sport.
So how do you fix all of this? I know there's not a simple fix for it, but how do you start to fix all of this so that it makes more sense for people to go to these shoots?
Well, there's a lot of ways that you fix it. The problem is, and I know this is going to be very controversial, with the current leadership that we have in the governing bodies, it can't be fixed. So that's the short bad answer.
Right.
Now, how do you fix it? Well, how you fix it is what we were doing with the PSCA. You have to have a professional side of the sport. That's not the foundation, okay? The amateur side is the foundation. But you have to have something for people to aspire to, and you have to create heroes in the game. That's number one. Then you create a amateur division, and you put stuff back. Let's look at what drew people back in the 80s and 90s to sporting clays. You didn't have to shoot 100 straight, and there was lots of stuff to win. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So if you look back in the early days, the very first shoot I shot was in 1984 at Carlisle Shooting Sports in Southern California. And I'll never forget it. My dad actually won the shoot, and he won a Beretta 302, which is a very interesting story in its of itself, because that's the gun I actually started to shoot when I signed with Beretta, but that's a whole other story. But at that shoot, there was probably 75 guys that shot that tournament. I would venture to say almost every person went home with something. There were guns and coolers and ammo and stuff to give away. You wouldn't believe the stuff that you could win back in the 80s and 90s. So what drew people to the sport and peeled them away from trap and skeet was it wasn't regimented. You didn't have to shoot 100 or 300 in the shoot off or whatever. And there was lots of stuff to win relative to what it cost to shoot. And slowly over the years, that slowly changed. So let me give you an example of how it changed and when. In the late 90s, when I started to dabble into politics in the NSCA, because I used to have run-ins with Hampton and DuPont, and we would butt heads like nobody's business. Partially because I'm loudmouth and outspoken, partially because I was the only one that had the guts to say anything. So those two factors led to I was the one that, would stand up in the meeting and go, hold on just a minute. As like in fact, when in 95, when they created the master class, how it worked was Mike Hampton had a meeting and brought us all in. And he said, okay, we're going to create this master class, and you guys are going to shoot for $100,000, and there's going to be 50 of you, and it's going to be very prestigious, and it's going to be great. And I raised my hand. I said, Mike, that sounds awesome. Do you have the 100,000? No. I said, will you do us a favor and wait until you have the 100,000? And he said, if you don't like it, do your own. And I went, huh. So what happened? They went ahead and they created the master class in 1995 or 1996. Personally, okay, in 95, I made about $50,000 in prize money. In 1996, I made about $6,000 in prize money, because what they did is they put 50 guys, the top guys, in master class. The problem was there was only 26 active shooters. They did on known ability. They didn't do it on 50 people that were actually shooting. They did it on 50 people based on known ability. So Matt Drake was on the list and a whole bunch of other guys that hadn't shot sporting clays in years. Mm-hmm. So at any given tournament, like let's say the U.S. Open, there would literally be 25 guys. So if you go to the U.S. Open and you have a $10 class option and there's 25 of you, you're shooting for $250. But if you go to the U.S. Open and there's 800 of you in double A class, guess what? You're shooting for 8,000.
Right.
Okay? Not even the same comparison. So we would go to shoots, and so it lasted about 3 years where we fought, tooth and nail at every meeting, and I said, look, you have to at least allow people to punch into master class. We're bleeding to death. Now at the time, it was perfect for them because they accomplished what they wanted. They were tired of the same top tier guys win everything. They wanted the second tier guys to start winning. And so their little plan actually acted perfect. It worked perfect for the way it was designed. But for the top guys, it was an absolute disaster, right? Because we'd go to a tournament. So like if I'd go to a tournament in California, there would literally be 5 or 6 masterclass guys at the tournament. Right. Then what they would do is that you'd go to the U.S. Open, right? And they would pay 15 places deep in each class. Well, guess what? in the master class, they pay $3. And we're like, whoa, hold on a minute. You know, I mean, how is that fair that we're winning the shoot and literally the guy in D and E class are making more money than the guy that wins? That's how bad it was. So, you know, when we talk about these things about, you know, making the sport go forward and going backwards, these are some of the examples I'm talking about, you know, and many people, you know, that are in the game in the last 5, 10, 15 years, they don't know anything about the history and how we got to where we got, because when they got there, they looked at the rules and said, oh, 15 punches, I make master. You know, they don't even have any idea that there was a 3-year span that no one could even punch in the master class. And what some of those guys that were in the game back there had to do to even get the rules changed. So, you know, there's lots of history there, and you know, we've taken a step forward and 3 steps back many times in the sport. But you know, it's good to see the sport growing, but we could do so much more. You know, when I took over the marketing committee on the executive council, this has been, I don't know, 2008, 2010, something like that. The very first thing they said, well, what are you going to do as the chairman of the committee? And I said, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put money back in the nationals. And you thought that I mean, holy, this was before people were woke. They went crazy. They're like, well, you can't do that. And I said, hold on just a minute. You haven't even heard my plan. I said, I'm not going to take the money and cash. I said, one of the problems that NSCA has always had is they have kept NSCA in turmoil. They being NSSA, the Skeet Association, has kept sporting clays in turmoil so that we never actually asked for the money, right? Because here's what happened. Back in the 90s, my captain used to say that $100 of the entry fee went back into prize money. Now think about this. In 91, 92, you had 400 guys, then 500, 600, right? $100, do the math. $100 at 500 people is $50,000. Divide that up between all classes. Hey, that's a pretty substantial tournament. Well, in the late 90s, they started saying, well, you know, people are tired of, we're tired. There was a narrative of, we're tired of paying the top guys, even though that wasn't true. So what they started doing is, well, we're gonna back off this money back to class, if you will. It was $100 in the main event, and it was $25 in the 5-stand and the Craigoff Cup and all of the other events, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what they started doing is, well, we're gonna you know, pull this back. And so I raised my hand and said, okay, hold on, time out. I'm all for it. If you guys want to take the prize money out, I'm all for it. What I'm not for is mandating the entry fees. And here's what I'm talking about. If you're charging $100 right now and you're giving $25 back to class, that means we're paying 75 cents a target. Take the entry fee to 75 cents, do away with the prize money, make it more affordable. You got my vote. I'm all in. But what's going to happen is, we've seen it a number of times over the years, you guys are going to back off the prize money $5 every year, and pretty soon it's going to be $100 with nothing back. Huh. Isn't that amazing? Remember what the Craigoff Cup was last year? I think it was $106, nothing back. Isn't that something?
Wow.
So we're exactly where I warned 20 years ago we were going to be if we didn't mandate it. If you want to make it cheaper, I'm good. But if you want to take the prize money away to let the NSCA make more money, I'm not for that.
Yeah.
But obviously, here I am as the top shooter. Even though I'm involved in politics, I'm one of the top guys. Oh, well, gee, you're just wanting to do this to make your own. What are you talking about? I'm the one voting for either cheaper or prize money, but not a hybrid, guys. That's a slippery slope. Either take the prize money out and make it cheaper, or keep the prize money.
Right.
Well, here we are with, no prize money, and it's not cheaper. It's more expensive. And the irony is, on the gun club level, at the local level, like my club at Elmfort, I have to figure out how to make money with 60 cents targets on the local level. But NSCA can get $1 or $1.50 a target if you look at FTASC, right?
Right.
And give nothing back. How is it that they can get double or 100% more than the local club just because. And that is some of the setbacks that I'm talking about, right? The local clubs have to figure out. And then here's the irony of the story. The local clubs, I've got to throw 60-cent targets or everybody complains on the internet, but NSCA can charge $1 a target at a major shoot. But not only that, they don't pay for their trap machines. They get their golf carts for free. They get sponsorships on clays, on ammo. You see where I'm going with this? How do you compete against that? That's one of the reasons why there's not many clubs left in San Antonio. Who can compete when they control the members' money? Now, I know that's controversial, but that's the truth.
Wow. That's a lot. I've never heard any of that. That's so, over the past 20 years, this has happened. How do you see it in the next 20 years? Getting worse or getting better?
It's going to have to get worse before it gets better. Okay, so I'll just tell you a couple of quick stories. So I'm on the marketing committee with the executive council of the NSCA. Many of the programs that we have, I'm not tooting my horn, but many of them I pushed to get them changed. The regional programs was my brainchild. How we do the nationals now, for instance, we Tim Miles and me and Britt Seibert, we pushed for getting changing the course to one course and having north and south because people were getting blown out with weather. Mm-hmm. Okay. I was the one that pushed to change the golf carts. If you remember 10 years ago, you'd rent a golf cart literally for one rotation. You'd pay $60 to go shoot the Craigoff Cup at 8 a.m. Then you'd go to the main event, get a different cart and pay a different fee for that golf cart. I was the one that said, no, we need to rent them by the day like everybody else and let people go to their different events. I was the one that we split the sub-gauge events to where they are now to get more people. So I went to the NSSA in the executive meeting and said, look, as part of the marketing committee, I'm going to grow the nationals from 1,000 to 2,000. Now, they all thought I was crazy. And I said, I want $125,000 to put into the national championships. I'm going to take the $125,000 and we're going to go to all the manufacturers, Browning, Beretta, Winchester, Remington, etc. And I'm going to say, Scott Grange at Browning, hey, I have $20,000 to spend with you. How many guns can you give me? But hold on before you answer that. Give me guns that you haven't been able to sell and give them to me 20% back of wholesale.
Right.
Now I've just turned that $125,000 into $300 worth of value. Right. And now we're going to give away 300 or 400 guns. And then I explained, okay, now if 1,000 people come to the nationals and 300 of them go home with guns, what happens? It's a domino effect, right? That guy goes home and he's won a gun. 300 of them go home and say, honey, I want a gun. Does she go, hey, how much does that gun cost? No, they don't care, right? He's won a gun and he thinks, how cool is this? It doesn't matter if it's a $500 gun or a $1,500 gun or a $10,000 gun, right? So those 300 guys go back home. They're talking to their buddies. Say, hey, I want a gun. Boy, I can't wait till next year. The next year we give away 300 more guns. The next year we give away 300 more guns. Now we're building on something, right?
Right.
And guess what? Within 4 years, we had 2,000 people. So back to the argument. What fixes the sport? You got to change the mousetrap.
Yeah.
Okay? People want to win stuff. They want value for their money, and they want to enjoy themselves. Okay? But in the NSCA, we struggled internally. Like we would be in an advisory council meeting, and I never forget this. I said, look, I want to split the sub-gauge, and here's why, and I want to increase the numbers to X, Y, Z, and a couple of the old guys raised their hand. We don't like that. And I said, well, okay, why don't you like that? Well, we may have to wait in line. And I said, what did you just say? Well, we might have to wait in line. I don't like B squads. Huh. I said, I'm not quite sure how to respond to that. Our job as your representatives in NSCA is to increase the membership and increase the attendance at national championships. Yet we have people on the board that vote against a plan because selfishly they don't want to shoot on a B squad. So tell me, how do you fix that? You can't. So what I'm trying to illustrate is that there are so many petty agendas in that room that's why many things never get accomplished, right? Because if you have to overcome that, you only have a short time. Like the annual meeting is a day and a half. How much can you accomplish in a day and a half, particularly if you have to pat somebody on the ass because he's worried about having to wait on a B squad? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so the problem that we have is that we have set up by design a set of rules by people that have conflict of interest. Okay? Everybody in that room has a conflict of interest. There was, 15 industry guys. Well, their conflict of interest is they want to sell more of their product. You had 15 shooters. Their conflict of interest is they want to do what they can to do whatever. Some guys just like to see their names in the book, right?
Yeah.
And that's why it's hard to get anything done, because everybody has an agenda, and everybody thinks everybody else's agenda is something else, even when it's not, right? And so then you get a guy like me that happens to be a pretty good shooter. Everybody already assumes that my conflict of interest or my, motivation is to, make more prize money or whatever. One of the stumbling blocks that I had to overcome, particularly with the NSCA, is they didn't want to support the PSCA because they felt like all I was doing is trying to push my television career. And I'm like, I didn't even ask for this. I voted against it the first year. I didn't ask for this. This fell in our lap. I just happened to be, relatively good at it. The minute one of you guys want to do it, I'd rather go back to shooting. You guys think I'd rather be announcing the game than shooting it? I want to shoot. But I sat on the sidelines and announced it because there wasn't anybody else that did it, that was willing to do it. So I did it. So that's the problem with our sport, is it is controlled by people that have conflict of interest. And so honestly, I wish I could tell you something else, but honestly, given the leadership and given the governing bodies, I think it's as good as it's going to get. We had a really, really good shot with the PSCA. Mike Osowski and David Mavericks, the guys, they spent $3 million in our sport over 4 years, right? $3 million. Never asked for a single thing. Didn't even want to be on TV. Didn't even want any notoriety, right? There's just guys with money that love to shoot and wanted to see if they could take it to another level. And they did more for the sport than we may ever see in our lifetime. And there were so many things behind the scenes that people know. I could tell you stories for days, and very interesting stuff. And these guys had heart of gold. But in the end of the day, the main reason, in my opinion, the PSCA didn't make it. Now, it didn't make it for a couple of reasons. Number one, funding was a problem. Okay. However, Mike and Dave were willing to make up that difference. But what they didn't like is they didn't like the contention between the shooters and the organizations. And that was really it. You had jealousy and you had guys. So one of the things, like, we had 75 pros in the PSCA. All I asked those guys is, look, whether you make the final 16 or not, I expect everybody's butts to be in the seats. You guys need to be in the stands, and you need to bring your entourages with you, right? Because every one of the top pros, they got 3 or 4 guys hanging around. They're all going to go to dinner and have a few beers after. Great. Well, you know what? On Saturday night when we're filming, I need y'all in the stands. Well, you go to the PSCA shoot, and I might have the top 16 guys and maybe 3 other pros. That's the problem, right? How do you keep guys that are putting $3 million in the sport on keeping their train going down the track when the top pros won't come at least for an hour and sit and support the event? That's the problem.
The PSCA is actually what got me into shooting.
I know. And Justin, I can tell you hundreds of people that tell me the same thing.
Yeah.
I have people that come in my gun club and go, I saw it on TV and it looked fun. Okay, hello, sporting clay industry, that's what we're missing. Okay? That's how you grow the sport. People see it, they're interested in it. Man, I'd like to try that thing, that shotgun stuff. That looks cool. Okay? And then they go. So we had the right mix. Okay? We had the formula. It doesn't have to be that particular game, but you have to make heroes. You have to make it interesting, and you're doing a personality show with a little competition thrown in. And the first year, PSCA budget was over $600,000 for the production. Okay, I got involved in year 2. I took the production from $600,000 to $300 in year 2 to $225 in year 3, and we made a better show. I just wish that I had the $1 million or $1.5 million budget that they spent in year 1, spinning their wheels and put it on the back year. You know, in season 3, you know how short we came up from having a season 4? $38,000. So $38,000 was the difference between doing year 3 and canceling the season. We came up $38,000 short.
That's amazing. That small amount of money is what stopped it.
But see here, our industry is kind of interesting because we're short-sighted as an industry. Let me give you a quick example. Our industry, rather than looking at it and going, you know what, if we have a professional division, there's going to be 1,000 Justins coming in the sport, right?
Yeah.
But they look at it differently. They go, well, gee, if we have a professional deal, then the price of poker is going to go up, and I'm going to have to do a contract with Wendell Cherry and Bill and John and, oh, golly, Ned, we're going to have to do deals with all these guys. But not looking at the fact, what about if we grow the pie, guys? Let's quit thinking about how to divide up the pie in smaller chunks, and let's make it bigger. There's 25 million people that buy hunting licenses in America. Well, how the heck do we only have 10,000 sporting clay shooters still after 30 years? Figure that.
Yeah. You were on the right. The PSCA was on the right track of growing heroes, for sure. Like I said, that's what got me into it. I can remember watching it on TV and thinking, I've been to clay shoots. I've seen them, but it didn't look nowhere near as cool as it did on TV. And those guys that you're talking about, the heroes, the guys that started the shooters I'm talking about, I mean, you would go to shoots and see these guys and think, these are the heroes. And then it stopped, and now it seems like there's no heroes.
Exactly. And I fought, with these guys and not fought, but fought for them and fought with them and said, look, guys, we need to do whatever we can to pull together. I mean, because we're trying to make you guys look larger than life. We're trying to turn you guys into heroes. So we need you guys to act like it. You got to think differently. This is not just a normal sporting clay shoot. Well, one of the complaints that we had was, well, we've got to be up for the main event the next morning. We can't be up till midnight. I'm like, well, gee, that's funny because I'm shooting in the main event. I'm paying my own way, and I'm up at 1:30 in the morning picking up your empty holes with my 2 kids. One of them sleep on the bench, my wife, Judy Morris, and we're the only ones left. When, if 20 guys came out there and helped clean up, we could all be gone by 11:30, right? But we had to do it on major events because we wanted to have the participation and we wanted the people. So we had the right mix. It's just that the industry, both the shooters and the industry, weren't ready to be professionals. And I know that sounds harsh, but it's true. We weren't quite there as a sport because we had a professional organization and we had a governing body that were a conflict of interest. The NSCA started out wanting to help the NSCA, but by year 3, they were doing whatever they could to destroy us because we were now a viable threat. And that's not good. We didn't want to be a viable threat. They had no ambitions to have a professional division in the NSCA. So what's the threat, right? But, the narrative was there and, the industry is committed and there you go. So that's the problem.
So the 2 guys that were in control of the PSCA over the past couple of years that it was going, do they still own the rights to the PSCA?
Yes, they still own the PSCA.
Is it ever crossed their mind to come back into it?
Yep. They told me when we canceled season 4, and I talked to Mike and Dave probably a couple times, every year. We run into each other. I'm in Houston, and I give the guys a call. They're two of the most solid guys you'll ever want to meet, and did everything they could for the sport and never asked for anything. And they have told me our plan to go forward was a 3-year, $5 million plan. And they said that they would pay half of it at any time. And the offer, I'm sure, is still there. If we could come up with the other money, then they would fund the rest and we'd be off and running. But they just, they weren't willing to keep doing it out of their own pockets without the backing of the industry. And it comes down to the same thing that happened in '96 with my guys here in Dallas. They said, look, if the sport's not going to support itself, meaning that the governing body is not going to support it, then what's it all worth? We're not going to put our money in it if they won't. And right. I don't blame them. How can you?
Yeah. What's half of it? What's the half? What's the money at half?
Basically, they said they would pay everything but about $1 million.
Okay.
So, the original plan the end plan, when we were in season 4, we were in a little different position, and it was time to go into, it was time to really expand on the senior tour, on the ladies tour, on the junior tour. And I had a whole plan to go and expand the junior tour. And the other thing that I wanted to do is create an association for the gun clubs. Because if we don't protect the gun clubs and they continue to get sold, see, there's two things that are fighting against us: market value of the land and cash flow. Okay? So these guys in the outer parts, if we don't support them, they're not going to have the cash flow. They're going to quit throwing sporting clay targets. All right? The other problem is we've seen it a number of times, whether it's in Florida or whatever, the land gets so valuable, like blackjack, they say, you know what, we're going to take the $50 million, we're out of here. How can you blame them? Right? But here's the point. If we don't do some things to create gun clubs and get some of the guys in our sport that have money and say, you know what, I want to leave a legacy, and my legacy is I want there to be shooting grounds for my grandkids. If we don't start doing that, there's not going to be any place to shoot. You can forget it all. When the gun clubs go away, you can forget all the youth programs, all the talk about, hey, we want women and kids and we want, all these people in the sport. If there is not a place for people to grow and learn and get involved, and it's not an hour and a half out of town, the sport's going to die. And we are not doing the right thing by investing in our future when it comes to land. I even had a plan. We were gonna create a foundation and do an endowment, like you can do an endowment now with land to college. Okay, we were going to create a foundation endowment where a guy could say, hey, I've got this 1,000 acres. I'm going to donate it. Okay, he can still use the land, and it becomes a shooting course. He gets the tax deduction, and it's a shooting range for forever. And that's how you protect it. So the only way to save this thing at this point is we got to kind of take a step back. We've got to get to the guys that really have foundational wealth and and have property, and can say, you know what, I got 1,000 acres. I'll go ahead and donate 300 of it. Takes the tax deduction, and I want that 300 to be a shooting range, so that my grandkids have a place to shoot. If that doesn't start happening, they're going to go away, because the people that are doing it as a land investment, hey, it's happening everywhere. Go try and buy land right now.
All right.
But the problem is, when it gets over 4,000, 5,000 an acre, you can't cash flow it. And now you've priced yourself out of the market. So we've got several things against us, and if we don't start protecting shooting ranges, we're going to have anything.
I'm going to slide back to the PSCA for a minute, then we'll move on. The TV budget in the PSCA, if that went away and you didn't have a TV budget and you didn't have it on TV, okay, would you still need that $1 million to continue with season 4 of the PSCA?
No, No. Okay. So the TV budget started out around $600,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We got it back to about 225, 250. Okay.
Right.
Now, I would argue that that's maybe a little light. Okay. It should be a little more than that. And here's what I mean. Judy Morris has done more for this sport than most people will ever give her credit and ever know. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Hayward Cunningham at Promatic. Okay. That was my team. I had Hayward and Judy, and I had my wife, Wendy, and my kids. That was our team.
Right.
And then I would literally hire Elm Fork employees on the weekend to drive the semi around the country. So, yeah, we probably cut it a little thin, but we had to.
Yeah.
Okay. So your production budget, $250,000, $300,000 is fine. All right. Then you have prize money. Okay. Prize money on top of that. Mike and Dave were always extremely generous. Okay. And I argued this point until I turned purple, which was, guys, look, I would rather cut this back from guaranteeing 50. Let's guarantee 40 or guarantee 35. And let's guarantee that we have a fourth year. Right? And Mike and Dave, they said, no, we said from the beginning, we're going to give away minimum of $50,000. That's what we're going to do. And, and I fought it because I said, look, I'd rather have longevity than do the $50,000, but I lost that argument. Okay. But Mike and Dave were probably not wrong, because if we would have got the sponsorship to come through, then it would all worked out. The problem is before Fiocchi pulled back, they were our title sponsor. Well, the problem is they pulled back in October. There is absolutely no way from October to January, when we're supposed to start the tour, to replace $100,000. Can't do it.
That's what Fiocchi was given, was $100,000.
Well, I don't know the exact amount, but
something
it was somewhere. It was a very large contribution for an ammo company. They stretched and did all they could, and they did more than I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
So, in total value, yeah, it was six figures, and it was very, substantial. And to lose that 60 days before your tour starts, it's impossible to replace.
So I'm just gonna clarify this. So if you still got the two investors, and if you had a third or fourth come in and make up the rest, the PSCA could come back and continue in season 4.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yeah. That's the thing that was always odd to me is we had meetings with a lot of different people, and the meeting that we learned that to tell you a funny story. So we walked out of a meeting. We were actually at the regional and the national fit task here at Side by Side. So this would have been July of year 3.
Mm-hmm.
And so Fiocchi comes in, and they're obviously part of the council. And he says, we are so excited about our partnership. We've now got 15, 20% market share, whatever their number was. And I went, uh-oh. And we walked out of the meeting, and I said, Judy, we got a problem. She's like, what's that? I go, Fiocchi's done. She goes, what are you talking about? They just announced they had the best year ever. I said, and I told her the story. In 1995, Fiocchi hired me away from Winchester in the early 90s, like 1992. And so me and Dan Carlisle and a bunch of us, we put together a team, and we had a really good Fiocchi team. And I remember that they had 0 market share at the time. And they said, when we get to 7%, that's our goal. Well, I never forget, we went, I'd won the one of the International World Championships in sporting that year. And we were in Springfield, Missouri, and they gave me a big plaque, and Carlo Fiocchi came over and gave me a big thing, and they announced that they had achieved their goal, and we were so excited. And I never forget, because Mike Shea was the director of marketing at Fiocchi at that time, and Mike was my boss at Beretta for a period of time as well. And about a month after that meeting in the mid-90s, he called and said, Scott, I got some bad news. And I said, what's that, Mike? He said, well, we're going to suspend the team. And I said, why? Well, because we've attained our goals. And I said, well, do the Italians not understand that when you attain your goal, you don't stop marketing? That's not really what you're supposed to do. You're doing good. You're kind of, and it starts working. You're supposed to continue what's working. Well, anyway, it didn't work. And so 15 years later, I heard the same thing, and I went, oh, I've heard that story before. And sure enough, they'd got their market share, and so they felt like they needed to move their dollars somewhere else.
Yeah. You got a lot of interesting stuff. I don't know any of this. I'm not supposed to, but I think that all of this is very interesting to me.
Yeah, I've been around from the very beginning. Before Sporting Clays was even Sporting Clays, we used to shoot in Coda Casa in the early 80s. And they had a duck tower and a crazy quail and a driven grouse. And so we simulated hunting, and we called it hunting clays because we didn't know any different. And then in about 84, 85 is when Dan Carlisle at Rahagi's in California kind of brought the very first one. There was a little group in Houston down at Champion Lakes that was doing some, and Carlisle kind of had the first shoot, first Sporting Clay shoot that I can remember in 1984. And that was the start of it. So I've seen the whole span and all the things we've done right and all the things we've done wrong, and everybody that's come and gone in the industry and what they've contributed. So, I've had the benefit of being involved and watching it all.
Are you still involved with some TV shows at all? I know you've done a lot, but are you still involved with anything?
A little bit, a little bit. After the PSCA, I've done some hunting stuff and some little things on the side, but Marcus Luttrell and I did a hunting show on the Outdoor Channel called Wild and Raw for 3 or 4 years, and Marcus and I have been talking again, and he kind of wanted to do a show, and so we've talked about that. But it's a huge commitment. When Marcus and I did the television show for Outdoor Channel, we spent 75 days a year filming. It's a huge commitment, and so it's a lot more than people think. And I used to tease. Willie Robertson, we'd be at an event together. And so ironically enough, Willie, they started Duck Dynasty and Wild and Raw at the same time. Our executive producer was a guy named Dave Bowles, and he kind of made both shows at the same time. And he was the one that brokered the deal when they went from Outdoor Channel to A&E and made Duck Dynasty as you see it today.
Right. And
so, watching these guys go from, I remember the day in the early 2000s where we'd be in a meeting with Beretta or whoever, and those guys had a hard time getting free guns. They're like, well, these guys just make videos, and they look like ZZ Top characters, and then good for them. Ironically, comes full circle. Now they're billionaires, and everybody wants their endorsement. So it's kind of funny how things happen. But I used to joke with Willie. I'm like, me and Marcus, we're never gonna make any money because we don't have any duck calls to sell. And Willie used to say, he said, Scott, the duck calls just get them in the door. He's like, we make all our money on T-shirts and hats. That's the deal. And he's like, we have thousands of people come through the store every day trying to buy T-shirts and hats, and that's what it's about. But you have to get to a level of fame where people will stand in line for 3 hours to buy a T-shirt and hat.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Good for them, but they've they're in a different planet now. Endorsing everything from toilet paper to, antifreeze. So,
yeah, that's one thing about, I was going to say, you've been involved with some good ones. If it's Willie Robertson, Marcus Luttrell, guys like that for sure.
Yeah, but after the PSCA, Hayward Cunningham at Promatic, Promatic moved every machine, did every event, from the start to the finish. Hayward helped set every target. He did, all the qualifying courses. He helped me with the main event. The problem was at the end of year 3, we had such a small staff that everybody was just burnt. Right? You can't keep taxing the same guys all the time. You can't keep going back to the same well and say, gee, Promatic, we want you guys to bring machines, to these shoots. I mean, here's a little trivia that not very many people know. Okay, Promatic does more for our industry than anybody. Okay, The regionals, these major shoots, they don't happen without Promatic, and the reason is no one else has 300 machines and 5 semi trucks to get them there, or the support staff. Okay,
right.
But here's the tragedy about this story. Everything Promatic does, the millions of dollars every year that they donate in kind or through donations or giving machines to people like me at the regional to make sure that I can have 9 courses going on simultaneously and I can make some money. They do it for nothing. Okay? They're not even allowed on the grounds of the national championships. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
So Promatic, being the number one supporter of our sport, doing all of the shoots from the U.S. Opens, the regionals, the states, everything that they support, they're not allowed on home grounds because of NSCA sponsorship with Laporte. Think about that. That is a crime.
I've always wondered why you don't see Promatic machines at nationals. I guess that's why.
Now you know why. Now you know why. It's because Laporte forbids it. A French company that you don't see traps anywhere except there forbids it. That's why.
That's some deep stuff. So the PSCA, you're talking about PSCA, Promatic, and all that. You know, the TV show, and we keep skipping around here about the PSCA, but that's fine. The TV show was what got me there. But what if the PSCA did something like a Facebook Live event instead of TV? Would that work? Do you think that would work the same way as TV?
It would. I don't think, when we were doing the PSCA, we were just on the front edge of all of the Facebook Live. And I think in year 3, we started to experiment with the Facebook Live and YouTube channels, right? So we were right on the front of that.
Right.
If we were to start it now, would it be necessary? No. You could do it digitally because the people involved and their exposure and their followers and their Instagram, you could do it and you could give the sponsors more value than cable TV.
Yeah.
Sure could.
And it's free most 100%. Of the time, to broadcast it. So.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's challenges in working through things, but, the shorter answer is yes, you could do it. And yes, you could reach more people, or at least equivalent people. I would argue that more people would see it. Right? Now, There's a whole other set of problems that we didn't anticipate now. Would YouTube let shooting on? And I mean, those were things back then we didn't even comprehend. We would never have thought in a million years they would censor that or could. Right. So, obviously there's a whole other, aspect to that you would have to deal with. But the short answer is yes, 100% you could do it.
Yeah. I think that's the trick. I think the trick would be to get the 2 guys, this is my opinion now, the 2 guys that were involved, get you a couple more investors and broadcast it online versus doing it on TV. And I think you'll have a bigger turnout in competitors and spectators because I think you'll reach more people,
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Yep, I totally agree.
This is a Sporting Clays podcast. Of course, you know that. And we haven't talked anything about your shooting. I'll tell you something that I found is pretty interesting is you are the most accomplished sub-gauge shooter of all time. Now, what majors have you won with sub-gauge, and why were you so obsessed with it?
I've won every world champion HOA World Championship that there's been. Mm-hmm. I think they've done 3 times at the World English in San Antonio, and I've won all of those. 1 year at the World Shoot, I won every gauge individually. I'm the only one that has been the captain of all 3 gauges in the same year. I've won sub-gauge championships at U.S. Open multiple times. I've won the Nationals 8 times, I think, although I'm still waiting on 3 rings that I haven't gotten. Hopefully Nikki hears that one. I've won the World Championship, 3 times in every gauge. I don't know why I've excelled at the sub-gauge. One thing is different when I shoot sub-gauge differently than 12 gauge, and I don't know how to shoot 12 gauge like this. For example, when I'm shooting 410, the only thing I'm thinking about is my trigger, right? Because the number one problem that people have shooting a 410 is they want to help it. You know, they want to make up for the fact that it's little, or make up for the fact that they don't have very many BBs. So they tighten up and try and help it. And so what I try and do is just be relaxed and think about my trigger so that I'm not jerking the gun and I'm being as smooth as I possibly can. I haven't been able to do that with a 12 gauge because, let's face it, I anticipate recoil like everybody else. It just so happens with a 410 and 28 after 3 shots, my mind goes, oh, it's okay. We can relax. We don't have to tighten up. And so, you know, I finally developed my sub-gauge skills where I used to help it, and now I don't. I try and be more relaxed than when I shoot a 12 gauge and try not to make the gun. I try and let the gun do what it's supposed to and try not to fix it. And that's helped more than anything.
No. Well, speaking of 12 gauge, I mean, you're just as good with a 12 gauge. I know your resume is absolutely incredible. What kind of hard work and dedication has been put into your shooting over the years? I know it's taken a lot.
Well, you know, we talked about my dad early on. Mm-hmm. One of the other things that he taught me more than anything is he was a shooting instructor for 20 or 30 years. He fundamentals was his number one thing. So I'll never forget, when I was about 10 or 11 years old, I started to get old enough and big enough. I was little, and so fatigue was always a problem for me as well. But I started to get big enough where he would let me go and shoot around a skeet. I could go down to the range and sign up and shoot around a skeet with whoever, with the older guys or whoever was there. So I could basically do it by myself, which was a big thing when you're 10 years old.
Right.
But he used to say, he said, Scott, if I can look down the line and I can tell from your body language whether you hit or missed, I'm going to come down there and I'm going to yank you off that line and you're done. And he only had to do that one time, where I came down and he could tell that I missed and I threw a little temper tantrum as a 10-year-old. I never forget, he walked right down there and never said a word, grabbed me by my ear and did that little ear twist thing and said, guys, go on without him. And he pulled me back to the motorhome and I was done for the day. But, you know, obviously as a 10-year-old kid, you're like, oh my gosh, my world's going to end. Mm-hmm. But what it taught me was, number one, fundamentals were paramount. And number two, your physical attributes affect your mental state. So if you're physically acting out that you're not happy, you can't be happy internally. They go together.
No.
Right? So that attitudes are contagious even with yourself. So monitoring your emotions and keeping yourself in balance. See, that's the thing a lot of guys don't understand. Lots of guys know how to shoot. Very few of them know how to compete. You've got to learn to compete after you learn how to shoot. Most people think if I learn how to shoot enough, I'm automatically going to be a competitor. It's not like that. We all know lots of guys that practice, man, they are good. But in a tournament, they go to crap.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because that guy doesn't know how to compete. He doesn't know how to separate them. They're different.
How do you get good at competing?
Man, we could be here for hours on that, right? But I mean, there's lots of things that go into that. You know, attitude and, you know, mental and, you know, shot routines and visualization. And there's a number of techniques and skills that you use, right? But the number one thing that you boil it down to is that you have to monitor your emotions. If you think of your emotions through a competition event, like a heartbeat, okay, they go up and they go down, right? Some stations you get up there and you're super overconfident and you miss a cakey target. But then some stations you're scared to death and you shoot pretty well. Why does that happen? Right? Mm-hmm. It's self-image. I mean, Lanny Basham's book sums it up, you know, better than anything. You've got your self-image and your confidence and your skills. And all three of those elements, they have to gel in order for you to have peak performance. So you have to learn how to monitor your emotions. Some days you need to pump yourself up. Some days you need to calm yourself down, but you have to be real with where you're at. And there's obviously a lot to it, but learning to compete is more important if you're going to be a competitive shooter than learning to shoot. Lots of people know how to shoot. Very few know how to compete, and there's a difference.
You know, I've heard that several times. Is it true that you're a left eye dominant shooter?
I am. Yeah. In fact, when I started shooting, when I was a kid, I was horribly eye dominant. The very first time I shot trap, I shot 1 out of 50. Okay, so here's my dad and grandfather. Here I am shooting at 8, 9 years old, expectation pressure, and they're champion shooters, and I shoot a 0 on my first round of trap. And the second round, the only way I hit one is I held right over the trap, and when I called pull, I pulled the trigger, and it ran into my shot. That was my, experience. So my dad, we started testing my eyes, and he figured I was left eye dominant. So from 8 to about 12, I shot with tape on my eyes. Well, 11, 12 years old, like we'd go dove hunting, and I'd forget my glasses. And he said, "Oh, well, I guess you don't get to shoot today." And I'd be like, "Bull crap, I'm going dove hunting just like the rest of them." And I'd come back with my limit. He goes, "How'd you do that?" So I don't know, I just shot. So then we started really getting into it and figuring out how this whole thing works. My dad was the coach in 1981 in the sports festival for the Olympic guys, and he met a guy named Dr. Getz, and he wrote a book called Inside the Trap Shooting, I think. And Dr. Getz was an eye doctor, and what he did in '84 was he took the men's Olympic volleyball team and put them in positions based on their eye test, not on their skills or their size, and they won the gold medal in '84. And so I went up there, and my dad had me go through the training. And what we learned, I was a trap shooter. But what we learned is I was left eye dominant, but more importantly, my eyes focused from far to close, quick, but very slow, close to far. Well, a trap target is going close to far, right? So if I didn't train my eyes to look out further and come back to the bird, I never could ever see a bird clearly. And I had to do exercises, and I had to put dots on ceiling fans and, try and slow it down and all kinds of stuff to train my eyes. But what we've learned since then is that it's muscle memory. So if you're a left eye dominant shooter, you're always going to be left eye, but it doesn't mean you're always going to have a piece of tape. All it means is you have to train your brain to know which sight picture to use. So it takes between 5,000 and 10,000 rounds. Now, to the average hunter, he's never going to shoot 5,000 rounds in his lifetime, so he's probably going to have to wear the patch his whole life.
Right.
However, a guy like you that gets in the sport, he might shoot 10,000 rounds in 6 months.
Right.
And he's over it. So, yes, you can train out of it. Yes, I'm severely left eye dominant. And actually later in my professional career, it actually has helped me more than I thought, because with the left eye dominant, I can see under the gun a lot better. And so, teal targets and stuff that's coming from below your gun, I could always see it better. All you got to do is make sure that, which one of those barrels you're putting on the gun. And that's a muscle memory thing.
So you're a right-handed shooter and a left-eye dominant shooter as well. So
that's correct.
So
correct.
If someone is facing this same problem, what kind of advice can you give to them because they're struggling right now with it?
You put a piece of tape on their eye. I've had hundreds of students over the years that I've either worked with or corrected where they say, "Well, gee, I'm going to shoot left-handed." No, I never substitute coordination for vision. Okay. And here's why. It would I could train you out of the eye thing in 5,000 to 10,000 rounds. Teaching you to go left-handed might take 50,000. It's not even the same ballpark. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. So I always choose vision over coordination. Let whoever shoot the hand that they're comfortable with. Some guys can do it and switch over, great. But you don't have to. Put a piece of tape on your glasses. You keep your depth perception and your peripheral vision. It switches over, and while you're doing it, your eyes are training to point where they need to. If you were left eye dominant and it was always going to be left eye dominant, when you reached out to grab a can of Coke, you'd miss it to the left. But your brain recalculates, doesn't it? And you grab the can of Coke. Well, how'd you do that? It's muscle memory, right? So you can overcome the eye thing, and you just do it with the tape, and about 5,000 rounds, you won't need it. You're still going to see two barrels. All you need to do is your brain needs to say, "Hey, right eye, you need to be looking at the right barrel, and we're going to do some business." And it works.
Yeah. Did you shoot an automatic your whole career?
By accident. I'll tell you the quick story how that happened.
Okay.
Beretta came to me in 1991 as a junior and said, "Hey, we want to hire you." And I said, "Great. We did the contract, signed the contract, and here we go. And this is like in, January, they come to me, and by April, you got the contract. Well, now the shooting season starts, right? Well, now, and it's the same thing today. If a gun manufacturer, let's say Krieghoff, the reason I know this is because Alex at Krieghoff is building me a gun right now. Talked to him last week. Scott, it might be 10 months before I can get you a different barrel. What? 10 months? Right? So even if Krieghoff was to hire a new pro, it might be 10 months before they can get him a gun if they don't steal it off from some other customer. Okay? So back in the early 90s, I was going to shoot a 680, and they didn't have any. So all I had was that original 302 that my dad had won in 1985 at Carlisle Shoots. It's funny how things go full circle.
Yep.
So I took it, the very first time I shot it was in 1992 a DU show, the DU Continental shoot at San Antonio at National Complex. And the very first time I shot it, I shot a 98 out of 100. Now, back then, 98s were humongous. You got to understand, back then, 80s would win most shoots, 80 to 85, right? I mean, I shot for almost 10 years and probably had a handful of 90s that I could, tell you I shot a 90. It just wasn't even heard of back then.
Well, all right, stop right there, Scott. Stop right there. Why is that? Why was that now versus now and then?
All right, a couple of reasons. Number one, no one knew how to play the game. Okay? Because back in the early 90s, we took, and I want to give Carlisle most of the credit for this, because of the guys still active, Dan Carlisle is probably the best instructor in the business. And over the last 40 years, he's been the best instructor in the business, and he's done a lot of innovative. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Back in the 80s and 90s, all the trap and skeet shooters, that's where everybody came from, trap and skeet, we would go and we would apply what we knew from trap and skeet and relate it to sporting, and we would start developing some type of a style, right? So we'd look at a crossing target and go, gee, that looks like a high 4 on the skeet field, except 10 yards further back. So high 4 in skeet's a 4-foot lead. Well, gee, maybe this is the 6-foot lead. And we would try and adapt it to that, okay? Then, in the early 90s, Anthony Matarese and Mike Matarese, I'll never forget, the very first day those two ever shot, they came to a clinic that Dan and I were putting on, I think in Pennsylvania or something. I think at Lehigh Valley or something. And I'll never forget, Donna came after the lesson and said, we want these boys to be champions. And she said, what do we have to do for them to be champions? And I said, well, Donna, pretty much, I guess, you need one of them to move in with Dan for the summer. And I was saying it kind of, semi-sarcastically, their very first time ever, hey, we want to be champions. How do we do it? I'm thinking, they're this is their first day ever. I guess you can move him in. Well, guess what? That summer, Anthony spent the whole summer with Dan. But here's where I'm going with the story.
Okay.
You take kids like Anthony and you teach them the applied skills and the whole concept of mounting ahead of the bird and placement and system of the pros and cutting off the birds and the triangles and all the stuff that Dan and other people had developed over the years, and you give it to a 12-year-old kid. Well, to him, it's just a matter of fact. Well, okay, yeah, great, I got it. Now what? So that's why all these kids are so daggum good, because they're taking 40 years of knowledge that all of us had figured out the hard way, right? I mean, in the 80s and 90s, no one ever mounted in front of a target. What are you talking about? Not mounted in front of a crossing target. That's stupid. We're going to swing through this sucker, and we're going to swing hard as we can until we freaking hit it. That's how we did it.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
You didn't start, 80% in front of a 8-foot lead. Like that's just crazy. And so then you started seeing a whole generation, starting with like the Anthony Matareses of the world, that were taught a certain way by the top guys, and then everybody became training the same way, and now it's the acceptable form, and that's why these kids, without the experience, could shoot so well.
Yeah.
because they were taught the right way. And to them, it's just the right way. They never question it. And all they do is perfect the system. Yeah. So, I mean, Dan kind of started it off in California, and then it was, there was little hits and misses and little clubs, and there really wasn't a whole lot going on. And then the USSCA started up, and a lot of us, and then the NSCA started in like 88 or 89. Well, then there were two worlds in sporting clays. Okay, there was the NSCA and then there was the USSCA. Well, Andy Duffy and I really shot the USSCA stuff because he and I liked the fit task disciplines. And USSCA was the sanctioned governing body of fit task in the day, right? So he and I thought we were in the right place because we wanted to shoot the test. We wanted to shoot on the U.S. team. I mean, the very first time I ever met Andy Duffy was he was on the men's team in 1991, and I was on the junior team, and we were on an airplane headed to Barcelona, Spain. And I didn't know who Andy was from anybody. And that year, I ended up doing good in the juniors, and I was the top American. I even beat Andy at that shoot. And they're like, who is this kid? And I was asking myself the same question. But I'll never forget, that shoot was in Andorra, and John Woolley set the targets. Still to this day, probably the greatest target set I've ever seen in all the thousands of courses I've seen. If you can imagine shooting on the top of the Alps in Andorra, looking over Spain and France, and literally having a target on the opposite side of a canyon with a 3,000-foot sheer drop and having a machine on the opposite side of the canyon, coming in 50, 60, 70 yards, and if you miss it, watching it settle 3,000 foot to the bottom for 30 seconds. Magnificent. First time I ever saw Batu, first time I ever saw a rocket, and the first time I ever saw a chandelle was at that shoot in 1991 that John Woolley set. And you got to understand, this was before the machines could do it, right? John had tweaked these machines to get him to throw these targets. It was amazing. I mean, I remember the first night of the World Championships that year, we're like, what is that chandelle rainbow target's what we called it. Well, how the heck do you hit that? Oh, no, no one even knew what to do with it. We'd never seen it before. So, now everybody takes it for granted, but I mean, golly, the day that a machine could throw a teal, that was an amazing time when Winchester came out with the first teal. For 10 years, we had Winchester rabbit machines with the bicycle wheel, and you could kind of game that because it took about 2 seconds for it to come out the wheel. So if you're shooting 5-stain, you shoot whatever target before that one, come back to the wheel. I mean, there was all kinds of things we do, but then they came out with a trap that threw a rabbit right on the call. They were like, "Oh crap, we got to rethink this one." It shot our plan out. But watching the companies come up with all the different targets, and I mean, the game is not even resemble what it used to, but it's good, and I miss some of it too. The fun of it, is different because it has commercialized, but it's been a great ride for sure.
So your boys, I'm assuming your daughter and your wife, you said everybody shoots. I saw Clay at the U.S. Open. How are they doing? How are they shooting? How's their shooting going?
They're doing great. Wendy, she does a lot more hunting with me than shooting. Her and I hunt and fish all over the place. Reagan is married now, and she shoots socially and enjoys it. Clay is really taking it serious and wants to make Team USA in the juniors this year. He's really pursuing it. He had made the PSC tour in the men's division and the junior division, and actually lost in the finals in the junior division last year, the PSCA. But he's actually going to go to Murray State College in Tishomingo. They've got a great gunsmithing school and shoot on their shooting team this fall, so we're excited about that. And Owen is 18 and still got one more year of high school, but he actually is interning already for a commercial real estate company in downtown Dallas. So he works 9 to 5 every day in downtown Dallas at 18 years old. So he's my little entrepreneur. He's off in the business world already. But Clay's probably the one that's going to hopefully hopefully carry the mantle into the next few years.
Well, I'll tell you this. I remember Owen, Bass Pro, one of the PSCA events at Bass Pro. I don't remember when that was, but Owen was small, and he could deal with a target now. I could not believe how well he could hit a target.
I'll tell you this. Owen has the most talent of any of my kids. Clay is like me, which I didn't have the talent. I just had to work hard. And Clay is the same. Clay just has to work hard and get better and overcome, the obstacles. Owen just has a natural ability and is one of the fastest shooters that I've seen. But I also often tell him, I said, Owen, it's not very impressive when you're shooting fast if you don't hit them all.
Right.
You really have to back it down because he shoots too fast that he, really doesn't make a good move to the target. He's not really, smooth, and it's hard to duplicate it when you're at that speed. But he does have, if he put a little time in it, he's most talented of any of my kids, but his attention span is about the size of a gnat. So
he gets bored with it after a minute.
Yeah, he's bored after the second pair, looking behind to see if any girls are watching him.
Are you still doing your trick shows?
Yeah, I still do about 10 or 15 shows a year. In fact, I've got a couple next month, and I'm doing a couple fundraisers for the governor of Oklahoma and a couple different ones. So, yeah, I still do about 10 or 15 private events a year. Not like I used to. I'm kind of enjoying working on the ranch and feeding the animals and going fishing when I want. And, I did it for 30 years, every weekend, 50 events a year for 30 years in a hotel, rooming with Kruger or Carlisle or putting up with Andy Duffy's stinky feet because he never washed them. I mean, and after 30 years, it's just nice to get to do what I want to do for a change. Yeah.
Where are you going to be next? What nationals, I'm assuming?
Yeah, we'll all go to nationals. I might pop up at a regional shoot or two. I'm still shooting a few birds here and there and trying to do some hunting trips. But, right now my schedule is get through COVID because I want to go to the Amazon and catch peacock bass, and I want to go to South America and shoot dove, and I want to go to Canada and shoot geese. So that's kind of what I'm trying to line up between now and nationals. But, it's definitely on my schedule. And, Wendy and I have been married for 26 years, I guess now. And, the nationals was the first event I ever took her to. So we've never missed one. And that's kind of a family deal. Just to get to see people that you've grown up with. I mean, a lot of people don't understand. I've grown up in this industry. I started shooting when I was 8 years old.
Right.
And a lot of people hold that against me because they still remember the 15-year-old snotty kid, not the 49-year-old guy that's been there and done that. So, I've been through it all, and I've had all of the ups and downs that everybody goes through. And, the good thing is it makes me a little bit more tolerant when you see some of these young kids, you can pull them aside and go, hey, tone it down a little bit, and here's why, because I've been through it and it doesn't pay. So,
well, Scott, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I know you have things you need to be doing, but I really heard a lot that I've never heard before. So that's I guess it's eye opening to hear someone talk, especially from back in the day when it started. So I appreciate your time.
Anytime. I appreciate what you're doing. I try and support anybody that's trying to promote our sport, and we need to do what we can. And what you're doing is good. It's necessary. We need to show people that, you can have fun with guns and you can have fun with your family, and it's something you can do for your entire life. And it's not something to, be ashamed of. We need to be proud of it. We need to get out there and push it, and we need to fight back for the people that want to take it away from us.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it, man. Good luck with everything you're doing in the future. Maybe we get somebody from this shooting world to jump on in the PSCA.
Absolutely. Hey, Justin, pleasure talking to you, and best of luck in the podcast, buddy. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Scott. See you later, buddy.
All right.